I am a DevRel for the open source project Keptn, and I would like to give you a little bit of insight today on what Keptn is all about, looking behind the scenes on the new approach that we take with Keptn when it comes to delivery and operations automation, specifically supporting DevOps and SREs that need to automate more in their organizations. So let me start sharing my screen. So let's kick this off. So as I said, this talk is behind the scenes of Keptn, event-driven delivery and ops orchestration. There's more information about me on this slide. Also a lot of more information about Keptn, the open source project, CNCF Sandbox project, where, if you're interested, follow us on Twitter, check out the Git repository, also join the Slack conversation or stars on GitHub, right? The better, the bigger the community, the easier it is also for us to move towards an incubation project status with the CNCF Foundation. All right, now let's get into the details. So one of the things, the reason why we're building Keptn is because we know that DevOps and SREs have to automate a lot of tasks in their pipelines. Traditionally, when I started with automation, we looked at a lot of CI tools to do some unit testing, some building, and then we kind of use these tools to do more and more. Nowadays, we need to do a lot of things, or a lot of things are asked from DevOps and SREs, whether it's around blue-green deployments, canary deployments, including functional and performance testing, also some chaos engineering. You see the list here. So there's a lot of things that our organizations want us to automate in order to speed up delivery, especially as we're moving to more modern architectures. Now, there's clearly no shortage of do-it-yourself Swiss Army knife tools. There's a lot of great tools out there in the CD space. For instance, if you look at Jenkins, right? I can use Jenkins to do everything, right? I can execute my tests. I can put some code in to analyze my test results, whether it's a functional test or performance test. I'm sure there's a plugin out there. You can add your notifications, right? If you want to push information to Slack or whatever your ChatOps tool is, you can do that easily. You can integrate with your APM tool, with your observability tool, because I'm sure these tools have their own plugins, or you just call their APIs. You can add an approval process. You can do chaos engineering. You can add security scans. You can do this across multiple stages. You can add some additional deployments. So obviously, it's all possible. Now the question is, why am I even here and then giving you another option? Well, because what I've seen, and this also triggered us to invest in Keptn, that if you need to build this automation and you use these really great tools, then you quickly end up with automation, with pipelines that really fast become very complex, like the one from Christian. Christian is a great guy, and he has a lot of skills around scripting. But the thing is, if you end up with a pipeline like him, where a simple pipeline that is deploying a new container into a cluster, then running some JMeter tests, and then parsing the results, and if this script is more than 1,000 lines long, longer than maybe the microservice that it deploys, then obviously something is wrong. I also see a lot of people are not following, engineering best practices of good code refactoring, good modularization. So you quickly end up with things that are very hard to maintain. Now, the other thing is, talking about engineering best practices, hard to maintain, refactoring, repurposing content. Details from Dynatrace, and at Dynatrace, they are moving from let's say, from more like the monolithic architecture to microservices. And obviously they have used Jenkins as their tool of choice. Start with a microservice, building a pipeline for it, taking that pipeline, making slight modifications for the next service, and with this onboarding more and more pipelines, which in the end ended up in the Snowflake effect. So what they actually did, they analyzed some of their key pipelines that they have right now for their backend services, and they realized that they have a high level of code duplications in those pipelines because of all the copying, pasting, and not following good practices right from the start in terms of code reusability. And this is what it is, right? Because they have built a lot of custom integrations, a lot of custom processes. So this is a problem that we want to solve, because this doesn't scale, especially as more and more organizations need to build the same type of automation. So this is why I want to introduce you to Keptn and give you a little behind the scenes look on what drove us to the architecture and how it works. So first of all, we looked at these automation pipelines that we see out there right now, where everything is kind of in one big file, in one big pipeline file or script or whatever it is, meaning the process, the tool integrations, and even some configuration, like you saw earlier from the screenshot from Christian, everything is in one big file. So what we said, this is something we need to change. We need to get rid of these dependencies. We need to separate the process from the tooling and the configuration. So therefore, what we do in Keptn, we define the process in one side, we have the capabilities, the tools on the other, and we keep the configuration in the Git repository. So Keptn itself is orchestrating these automation sequences or these sequences of tasks on the left. And in order to connect with the tools or with the capabilities, Keptn uses eventing. So for instance, if you want to automate this particular set of sequences, like the sequence of tasks here, build comes along, prepared, and maybe deploy comes along, what Keptn does, Keptn sends an event saying, I'm at the deploy state. I have this artifact that needs to be deployed in the dev stage, and I have some additional metadata, like whoever defined that process, they want to do a blue-green strategy. So now you can have one or multiple capabilities on the right side that are subscribing to these events. It could be a Jenkins pipeline that you use to deploy. It could be a GitLab pipeline. It could be Keptn. It could be just a Python script, whatever you have, or a Helm chart. So that means you can have capabilities that are subscribing to these events, doing that particular task, additionally reach out to the Git repository to access additional config files like Helm charts that is needed to actually then do the deployment. Once it's done, sends back the event to Keptn that either everything is good or something failed, and based on that, Keptn makes a decision to move forward. So really from a Keptn perspective, and you will hear this later and see this, we have a shipyard that really defines sequences of tasks per stage that you want to automate. We then have the Keptn uniform, which are basically the list of subscribed Keptn services. This is how we call them. So these are the actual tool integrations, but they are subscribed to events. So that means you can easily repurpose it. There's no hard-coded integration into the process itself, but it's through an event subscription. We have the configuration in Git, as I mentioned, and we're using events, but not just any events. We're using cloud events. We're basing all this based on the cloud event standard. So what does this give us? It allows you to add more automation to your pipelines. So we're not replacing your pipelines, but instead of you building additional automation, additional process logic tool integrations into your existing pipelines, making them become very complex, you can look at Keptn and easily use the declarative approach to say, I want to automate this sequence of tasks. And then through event subscription, you can say which tools should handle it. Now, some stats on the right side, we've seen 90% less automation code. Keptn has been built, as we explained earlier, on the concept of separation of concerns. Process, tool, and configuration is changed. Config is all stored in Git. Now, SLOs is a very big topic. I will come to this later, but SLOs are built in. That means where Keptn can evaluate after every step if you're still meeting your quality criteria based on service level objectives, and then decide whether the process should go forward. Most importantly, Keptn doesn't replace any of your tools. It connects the tools. It avoids your need to build automation to connect the tools and chain them together in the automation sequence that you need. All right, that means whatever tool you have, keep those tools, whether it's a Jenkins, a GitLab, a Harness, an Octo, whatever it is, keep it. But if you want to add additional automation steps, like reaching out to a monitoring tool for SLO configuration, automating performance test execution, sending out notifications, use Keptn. Use the declarative approach. Keptn orchestrates these tasks for you. Now, quick word on Shipyard. We'll see this later in my live demo as well. Shipyard is the key concept where you actually specify the automation sequences that you want Keptn to orchestrate for you. So you can have sequences within each stage. You can have multiple stages. Within a stage, you can have sequences. Like here's the testing sequence. And you can see here, there's some tasks in there that are executed. You will see this also later in my demo in the UI. We call the UI the Keptn bridge. Interesting is, so Keptn sends events internally. So that when I kick off this particular sequence, when I say Keptn, please trigger the testing sequence, then Keptn starts sending the individual events to trigger the individual tasks, like actually running a test with the additional metadata from the Shipyard file, like a functional test to be executed. Now, the reason why I highlight this here, because this is a very cool concept. So you specify your automation sequences, and you can also chain them together through the triggered on option here. So you can do conditional chaining of events or of sequences, as we call them. That means in case the testing sequence finishes with the result passed, in this case, the performant light sequence will trigger, which will then, maybe trigger some additional performance tests. And you can also trigger them across stages, right? So this is a really cool thing on our Shipyard concept. You specify sequences contain tasks. They will then, through events, trigger the individual tools, and they can all be chained together. Very important, like how does this really work? I know a lot of people are asking us, so what tools are supported? How do I get in my own tool? We have a set of tools that we have already built, so-called Keptn services for. You can find them on the GitHub repository. You can also build your own. We have a template for you, Go-based template, where you can just build your own service integration for whatever tool. Now, this is just an example for JMeter. JMeter is one of the tools we support out of the box, but in case you want to build your own tool that is handling a certain event, you can implement it based on the template. But essentially what happens, your integration will then typically handle a so-called triggered event, either a test triggered, a deployment triggered, or you can come up with your own task name. It will also then receive the additional metadata that is specified in the Shipyard file. So your tool actually knows what additional thing it should consider. Now, this will then trigger the actual tool, in this case, JMeter. It could also be if you build an integration, let's say with a modification tool like Slack, you could then make a call to that particular tool. Now, one thing that is important, because everything happens obviously event-driven and a lot of things are asynchronous. So if your integration is triggering a process in an external tool like JMeter, like Jenkins, like Slack, what I said earlier, you want to report back to Keptn saying, hey, I actually started my duty, my task. This is just some status reporting. And once everything is done, right, let's say you run your test, and when you're done, then you would send back, hey, I'm now finished. This is the way how Keptn can keep track of status on which tools are actually really actively participating in a workflow. Another very key concept, and I want to show you this again in more detail, is SLOs. I mentioned that Keptn is using service level objectives for making data-driven decisions. That means you have the opportunity to add the so-called evaluation task into any of your sequences at any particular point in time of your automation sequence whenever you want Keptn to reach out to your observability platform to figure out how is your system doing, how are certain tasks, how are certain metrics doing. Now, the way this works, we have another Keptn service. We call it the Lighthouse service that is there that will retrieve SLAs and compare them against your SLOs. Now, you can actually specify your SLOs, service level objectives, which means what type of metrics, what type of SLIs like error rate, JVM memory, count DB. This can be any type of metrics that you can pull in from your observability platform, from your testing tool that provides it as a result. So you specify what are the objectives, what is your success criteria that should be evaluated as Keptn is automating that chain of tasks. Now, I have a couple of more talks where I talked about the details if you want to learn more. But what's important here is the concept of the separation of concerns again. On the one side, you have SLOs. What are the objectives? On the other side is you need to figure out how do I get the data? And this is where our SLI providers come in. So Keptn supports multiple data sources. We call them SLI providers. They all again come in through events. Every SLI provider that you want to hook up to Keptn, therefore also has its own configuration on how to actually retrieve these metrics, right? It could be that you're using Prometheus, and here are the queries that then are executed against PromQL to query this particular data. Or if you're using a tool like Dynatrace, here are the Dynatrace query languages. The nice thing about this is you have a nice separation of concerns. You have somebody in your organization that can define the queries, those that are the experts on your observability platform, and then the users of it that want to enforce SLOs can just define their SLOs, their criteria, without having to become expert in your observability platform. Now, how this works, right? The Lighthouse basically says, I need this type of data based on the SLOs. Through events, reaches out to the providers. They get the data from the external tool, pull it back to the Lighthouse service, and then the Lighthouse service does all the evaluation based on the pass and warning criteria, and then in the end, calculates a total score that is then used to make a decision on whether we should stop the process or not. Really powerful. Another thing behind the scenes, this was brought in with an architectural change with Keptn 0.8, multi-cluster support. This was a big thing. So you now can install the Keptn control plane, the heart of Keptn, the Shipyard controller, the Lighthouse service, the configuration service, and whatever services you want to have centrally available for all of your projects, or just centrally on that same cluster. But what we've also now allow you to do is you can now install the Keptn services that then do a particular task, like executing a test, deploying to different machines, to different servers, to different stages. So for instance, you could have, right, as you see here in the example, the Helm service in pre-prod, but also in prod on a different cluster. You may have a particular pre-prod staging environment where you have a different testing service, like the Neoload service, as compared to the dev environment. So that's the cool thing. You can install these Keptn services now in different environments, maybe behind the firewall, or just wherever you need to have them based on the way you structure your stages. And the way this works is these execution plane services are polling the Keptn API and simply ask, hey, is there something for me to do? Yes or no. Now, the nice thing is the execution plane is not limited to Kubernetes. The control plane, yes, needs to run on Kubernetes, but these execution planes, these are just the Keptn services itself that poll the API, can literally run wherever you want them to run. All right. Multi-cluster support also allows some really interesting features for delivery. This was heavily driven by some of our early adopters, where they said we need to have multi-stage parallel deployment into different environments. So now you can actually use this multi-cluster support and the capability of us having different automation sequences defined for different stages to then in parallel trigger these sequences and then targeting different stages at once. So you can really do some things like here. You can automatically have Keptn roll out or execute sequences that deploy an app on GKE, EKS, AKS, and wherever at the same time, and then always triggering the right execution plane that is installed there and listening for these type of events. All right, enough with the words, with the slides. Let's see and explore it in action. Let me switch over to my browser. Okay, so I have a Keptn installation here. Let me just zoom in a little bit bigger. I run my Keptn actually on K3s, so keys. You can install Keptn, as I said, on any type of Kubernetes cluster. I decided to use K3s. I have also a tutorial that is automatically then installing a couple of these projects here. Now, before I go into too much details, let me show you one thing. Let's focus on the demo delivery. And I'm opening up this here. So what I have in the demo delivery, I have a 3-stage environment: dev, staging, and production. And on this particular project, I have a service called the simple service, right? Where I can see Keptn has already been doing a couple of things and is currently in production, has deployed version number 3 in production. I ran actually build number 3 a couple of times earlier. That's why it shows up twice here. I also have automation sequence overview. So here I can actually see what is Keptn currently doing, right? What's happening in dev, what's happening in staging, and also what's happening in production. Where is it maybe currently stuck? Where is it waiting on things? Now, let me go back to this dev, staging, and prod. If you want to set up a project like this, like the demo delivery, then initially, remember, we have this concept of a Shipyard file. So let me open up this upstream Git, because Keptn internally holds a Git repository, but you can then specify an upstream Git. This could be GitHub, could be a Bitbucket, could be whatever Git you have. I have decided to use Git here. So this here basically is the Git project that Keptn holds internally for my demo delivery project. And on the main branch, I have my Shipyard file. This is the Shipyard file that I have initially specified. And like, nice thing is I can change this, so I can add new sequences at any point in time. But you see here, really, this is the whole definition of my automation sequence is like this. It is 72 lines long, which means 3-stage delivery with direct deployments, blue-green deployments, automated rollbacks. It's just the definition of the process. So I have a delivery sequence that starts with a deployment, with some testing, with an evaluation, remember the SLA and SLOs, then with an additional release option where I can, notify somebody that, hey, there's a release, do you really want to approve it? Or do you want to know something? And then we actually even have an approval process where I can have a human being or also through an API say, do you want to approve this based on the evaluation result? And here I've actually specified the approval should happen automatically in case the evaluation results in pass or in warning. And then you can see here, I have my staging stage. And in here, again, I have a delivery sequence that I say, I want to trigger it on when dev delivery is finished. Here I have some different tasks. I have Monaco. This is where I automatically let a task execute that can do monitoring configuration for me. So making sure my Prometheus is properly set up or my Dynatrace is properly configured. And then it goes on and on and on. And in staging, you can see here, I also have an approval process where I say, I always want to have a manual approval before it goes into production. All right, so this is this here. So let me just go back quickly to show you demo delivery. Right, if you saw this earlier, everything you see here, the 3 stages, dev, staging, and prod, everything was just the process, the definition behind that is happening. Now, where are the tools? Remember what I told you about the tools? There's no tool definition in my process definition. This all happens through events. Now, where can I look at events? I can look at the so-called sequences here, right? If I go back to dev, remember, I had a delivery sequence, and in that delivery sequence, I started with a deployment, test, evaluation. So what the deployment task really does, Keptn is sending an event and says, hey, I am triggering the deployment, and here's some additional information that I got from the user. For instance, which Docker container should be deployed. And this is then passed on to any tool that is subscribing to the events. In my case, I'm using Helm. So Helm, that is listening and subscribing to these events, says, hey, I think I can do it. I'm responsible for this stage. Therefore, it sends back deployment started. It does the deployment, and when it's done, it is sending a deployment finished event with additional information like, hey, it did a direct deployment, and here's the deployed URI, and here's the public API, public URI, some additional information. This information is then taken and also passed to the next sequence. So for instance, the next step was testing. So Keptn triggers an event and says, hey, I want somebody to now trigger tests. And here is all the information I've collected so far from all the other tools. And there's some additional information that was specified in my Shipyard, in my process definition, that we should do some functional tests. Now, in this case, I have JMeter. So JMeter says, yes, sure, I can handle it. So it sends a test started. And when it's done, it sends a test finish, and so on and so forth. Now, you may wonder, where does the Helm service know which Helm chart? How does JMeter know which JMeter scripts? Well, let me go back to the Git repository. Remember, this is my demo delivery Git repository. I'm here in the main branch. But what Keptn automatically does, it creates a branch for every stage. And in that one, our convention is you have a subfolder for your service. So a project can have multiple microservices, applications, whatever you want to call them. And in here, you can then upload the tool-specific files. Like here are all my Helm charts. Now you may wonder, so where are the JMeter scripts? Well, the good news is we also have an inheritance option. So if I go back to the main branch, I have some global JMeter files here. That means you can actually put config files either on a project level, on a stage level, or on a service level per stage. So you're really flexible. You also, it allows you to really inherit files from or defined in project level, project-wide, stage-wide, or service-wide. Now, last thing I want to show you, because you may wonder, so Andy, you talked a lot about SLIs and SLOs. Where is this all happening? I'm clicking to the staging environment now, because in staging, I actually have an evaluation here after test that produced some result. The concept is the same, right? We got an event, and then the lighthouse service is kicking in with started and finished. Now the question is, okay, what are the results? So we have a special visualization of all of these results. These results or these data points have been pulled out automatically from my monitoring tool. The only thing I had to specify is, remember, the SLIs and the SLOs. And you can specify them either as YAMLs. Again, they're stored in the Git repository, or we also have an option, depending on your monitoring tool, with some specific integrations. So, for instance, with Dynatrace, obviously, I work at Dynatrace with an integration where the only thing you need to do is you need to build a dashboard, you put a couple of metrics on it, and then this will automatically be analyzed for you. But this is specific to that particular tool. Yeah, so last but not least, let me just quickly still show you. If I go to staging, and obviously I want to be in, let's go staging, and I go into my simple node. So here's my SLO file, right? That's also the great thing. You have all of the relevant configuration in your config repo, your SLIs and your SLOs. And in the end, I cannot repeat and stretch this enough. The only thing you really need to do if you want to use this, you have to specify what type of tasks you want to automate. And then you provide the configuration files for the individual tools, but there's no hard coding anymore. Keptn takes care of all the integration for the events, and Keptn also takes care of managing that process. Last but not least, before I go back and finish, how do you interact with Keptn? There's a Keptn CLI, so I could, for instance, say I want to trigger a new delivery. So I can say Keptn trigger the delivery sequence in a particular project for a particular stage for a service, and then you can add additional metadata. Like you may have wondered, where did the container image earlier came from? So now I just said for the demo delivery project, right, which is, here we go, demo delivery. I now just kicked off a new process. It's now starting in dev, and it's now going through the whole thing again. So I can kick it off through the CLI, or I can also kick it off through the API. This is typically the way how you would use Keptn and integrate it with your existing tools. Let's say you use Jenkins for your CI, or you use Keptn for building, and then you can kick off a automation sequence in Keptn. So you have the option to post an event, just as I did here, and then just say, this is Keptn, what I want you to do. There's also some other cool API endpoints where you can access the configuration service, which means all the Git repository behind the scenes, access statistics, and so on and so forth. All right. Hopefully you like what you see. There's a lot of cool things. I also encourage you to look at some of the tutorials without there. One that I have is with Argo rollouts, where I am using the same app that I had, but with Canary deployments. So check it out, also with some additional SLIs and SLOs and so on. Okay, let's go back and kind of finish. So I hope you have seen Keptn. So Keptn, I believe, is a really cool opportunity for you to pick the use case that you need to automate in your organization. And it ranges from something simple as just the evaluation. You can also do test and evaluation. You can do delivery. You can do chaos engineering. You can do auto remediation. I even haven't covered this use case. So you can also automate tasks in production, like receiving an event from your alerting tool and then triggering auto remediation actions. Bring the configuration for the use case. You saw this, bring the individual tools, the SLIs, the SLOs, the runbooks, the Shipyard. Most importantly, connect to your tools. If we haven't yet already built an integration for your tool, then it's easy to build your own. Keptn truly then automates the configuration of these tools, connecting them and providing these different use cases as a self-service. Everything is declarative, everything is stored in Git, SLAs are at the core, and we base everything on open standards. All our events are based on cloud events, and we're currently working with the CDF to standardize all of these events. We have a lot of cool use cases already from our users, whether it's Sumit from Intuit, whether it's Roman from Twistcon, or whether it's Christian from ERT, who have been using Keptn for different use cases, starting from just quality gates to performance automation, or all the way full multi-stage delivery automation. And we've also received some nice words from folks like Karash, who is a software engineer at Facebook. And I think this is the best quote you can ever get. Keptn feels like a reference implementation of Google Site Reliability Engineering and the Site Reliability Workbook. Thanks for that. So if you want to get started, go to tutorials, keptn.sh. We have a couple of tutorials out there. Or go to the docs, go to the Slack channel, join us, give us feedback, help us grow this project. Yeah, and that's really what I wanted to say. With this, thank you so much, and have a good rest of the conference. And now let's head over to the Q&A. Bye-bye. I think we're officially out of time, so that's why thanks for the participation. And if you have any more questions, I think you'll find a way to reach out to me. But now enjoy the rest of the conference or whatever you have. Okay. And I'm just answering some more questions that I can see here on the Q&A. Shruti, you're asking about what is the process of integrating with services which are not currently using cloud events. Pull the data from the Keptn API, or pull the events from the Keptn API. We're also working with the CDF now to standardize our cloud events. But in general, you can pull the Keptn API and ask Keptn, are there any events that need to be handled? You can then filter it on project, services, and stages, meaning you can say you have a service that is acting or wants to act on a certain task in a particular environment. So you can pull the Keptn API, and when you think this is an event that you want to handle, then pass it on to your tool, let Keptn know about it, and then once you're done, send it back. We are currently implementing some other, let's say, interesting, hopefully, tools or extensions. There's a generic executor service already where you can just execute a Python script, a shell script, or an HTTP webhook. There's also native webhook support coming. And there's also one project where you can just deploy a container basically as part of reacting to an event or a particular task. Bruno is asking, is there any plans to offer Keptn as a service? Could it be replacement for full-fledged CI/CD tools? So Keptn really aims to automate, to help you with automation around delivery and also operations. So I don't think we want to replace CI, even though, of course, in theory, you can do it, right? Keptn is the orchestrator of automation sequences. We see us as solving the problem of tool integrations and kind of the logic that goes into building your process automation. I think we see us integrating a lot with these tools like CircleCI and Jenkins. You know, for some use cases, I'm pretty sure you could even go just with Keptn, what Keptn provides. But I see us more as the connect and the orchestrator. Is there a plan to offer Keptn as a service? We currently bring, as Dynatrace from a commercial side, we're bringing in some parts of Keptn, especially the quality gate, into our commercial offering as a service. And maybe in the future there will be others as well. But right now we're focusing on the quality gate feature. I think overall we
want to make sure that the open source project grows and people can decide where they run Keptn. But who knows what the future brings. There's more in the chat. Oh. Yeah, and if you want to know more, right, there's so many resources out there. And thanks for the CD, for CDCon to let us present here. I think in general, we hope to show you new ways and attract people to use the stuff and contribute back, because we are definitely by far not done and perfect. We want to make sure you can also save your investment. This is why our aim is not to replace tools, but what I always say, friends don't like friends build their own cloud automation. Because as you've seen from some of my examples earlier, of course, you can build all type of automation, all the logic and all the tooling integrations yourself, but this is really what you want to do. Is this really your job? Or is your job just helping your organization getting better business features out? And so let's use some open standards and better approaches to define automation. Let's learn from Google reliability engineering to bring in SLO evaluations as every step along the way. Let's use open events like cloud events to connect tools. So our hope in the future is that more tools will support these cloud events out of the box. So the need for building integrations will also, go away. Is Keptn an alternative to Spinnaker? We actually have people that integrate Keptn with Spinnaker. So Keptn itself, as I said, when you talk about deployment, Keptn is orchestrating the deployment, the testing, and the evaluation. The question is, what do you use for deployment? You can use our Helm service that comes with Keptn. You can call a Jenkins pipeline. You can call any other script that does the deployment, or you can call Spinnaker and say, hey, Spinnaker, you do the deployment. You can also revert it. And this is one thing we've seen, people using Spinnaker for deployment, and then for the evaluation for their Kayenta, pulling the metrics and evaluating your canaries, then use Keptn for the capability that Keptn has for SLOs. So in the end, I think the nice thing is you can decide which tools you want to have in your tool belt and how to connect them. So yes, for certain use cases, I'm sure you can go with Keptn, what comes with Keptn out of the box. But in the end, you need to figure out what's the best tool for a particular task, and then use Keptn to connect the dots and chain them together. And as I said, we've seen we have some users that are using Spinnaker in combination with Keptn. We've also have an Argo rollout integration already, so an Argo rollout service where Keptn can use Argo rollouts for the Canary rollout, and then between the rollouts is using the SLO capability. It's also part of the tutorial that I've put out there, which includes Argo rollout. By the way, I don't want to hold you off from, because I think I'm already using more of my time than I officially had. So, and I also hope that you still hear me, because I still see people online, so I assume people still hear me. And Oliver, if hopefully this answered your question, also Bruno. Answer your question. Perfect. I can see chats in there. Oops, no emojis, yeah. I get your +1. It's all good. Well, and for those of you that are following the Euro Cup, whatever team you're rooting for, hopefully you win. It's going to be a couple of more. Portugal. Yeah, we'll see what happens tonight, huh? I'm actually a little disappointed about Spain, but I guess I was expecting a little bit more from them. I am from Austria, and I am very excited that we made it to the next round. Unexpected, but happy. even though the Italians will kick our ass on Saturday, but that's okay. All right, folks, let me know if there's any other questions other than who is going to win the Euro Cup or is going to make it to the next round. Otherwise, I want to say thanks again to CDCon, to everyone that listened in, to the people that asked questions, that left comments. Hope to see you in the Keptn community. With this, bye-bye. May the best team win the Euro Cup. Bye-bye.